What is the unconscious? It's a word that we use every day, but when you see an image, do you really know how much of it you're conscious of? Here, you will probably be focusing on the flower, but how much will you remember the background and what's around it? We see many things every day, and usually most of it isn't interesting enough for us to pay attention to and remember, but it's still reaching our minds through our eyes. So what do we do with all this extra information? That is what makes up our unconscious. How much do you really know? A very common phenomenon happens to many people every day. Sometimes we call it a hunch, sometimes a gut feeling or intuition. In these moments, we feel we know the answer to a question, but don't know why or where we learned it. At the Visual Cognition Lab at the University of British Columbia, we set out to investigate where these hunches come from, and if they reveal an inner intelligence which we aren't consciously aware of. In order to do this, we needed to find a way to ask participants questions without them feeling that they were consciously answering them, and we discovered an amazing and novel way to do this. By using Ouija boards. Most people, if you ask them, will tell you that they don't believe Ouija's work. The surprising truth is that if you place your hands on a Ouija with another player and ask a question, then most likely it will begin to move, and you won't feel responsibility for the movements it's producing. The reason this occurs is due to the Ouija's ability to make us confuse our own unconscious movements for the movements of another player. As a human, it is impossible to remain completely still, and our brain easily identifies our own small unconscious movements as meaningless, and like the background of the picture, ignores them. When playing Ouija, our brain has no way of knowing if these small movements are made by us or by another player, and it instead feels like someone else is moving the Ouija to spell out answers. This phenomenon is known as the ideomotor effect and is a very natural human function, and when triggered, a very strong illusion. For our experiment, we asked the question, if our unconscious mind is directing the Ouija, then could this old party game be a secret window into our unconscious, and a method to meet our unconscious selves? We set out to test this theory with a simple experiment. All our setup required was several computers, a Ouija board, and some blindfolds. Our experiment begins when two participants enter the room. We first instruct them to answer a series of yes or no general knowledge trivia questions on the computer. In addition to answering these questions, we also ask them to indicate when they are guessing the answer. We tell them only to mark guess when they have absolutely no idea what the answer is. Thus it should be a 50-50 chance whether they get it correct or not. Later, we'll be asking the participants these same questions that they marked they had guessed on, except on a Ouija board, to see how their accuracy changes. Once the participants have finished answering the questions on the computers, we then ask them to arrange themselves around the Ouija board, where we will train them to play the Ouija game. In a trial, we first ask the participants a simple yes or no question, and then instruct them to wait until they feel the Ouija start to move, and to simply allow it to move in whichever direction it wants to go. Even though most of our participants will never have played the Ouija game before, it still usually only takes a couple of tries before the ideomotor effect kicks in and the Ouija begins to move seemingly on its own. Here we have a problem though. If we wanted to compare a player's conscious and unconscious answers, then they would have to be playing the game alone. We needed to find a way to get a single person answering unconsciously on the Ouija, and we came up with a very simple way of doing this. After training, we tell the participants they will need to wear blindfolds. We give them various reasons why this is necessary, none of which are actually true. The real reason why they need to wear blindfolds is because one of the participants secretly works at the lab, and as soon as the experiment begins, he immediately removes his hands and doesn't influence what answer the Ouija will produce. Despite the fact that the other player is no longer contributing to the action, the remaining participant will still mistake their own unconscious movements as the other player, and will feel very strongly that someone else is moving the Ouija, even though they are entirely responsible for the movement it produces. The participant is in a very strange position now. Even though their consciousness has been removed from the situation, their unconscious continues to carry out the task of answering the questions, operating like a sort of autopilot which may handle many of the simple tasks we face every day and are not worth paying much attention to. It is a state very similar to hypnosis, and the fact that participants continue to productively answer questions shows that consciousness is not necessary for action, and gives researchers an opportunity to interact directly with the subconscious autopilot. Once the Ouija session has concluded, we then ask the participants to return to the computers, where they will answer the second half of the general knowledge questions and will continue to indicate which answers they know and which ones they are guessing on. We take this extra step to make sure there is no ordering effect. At the very end, we debrief the participants and inform them that they were in fact the only ones actually producing the answers on the Ouija board. And this is the best part of our job, that look of surprise. The results of our experiment were amazing. We found that when triggering the ideomotor effect and unconsciously answering questions, participants suddenly knew much more than they did before. Participants went from guessing correctly on half of the questions they didn't know to answer them correctly almost 2/3 of the time on the Ouija board. This means that when in this hypnosis-like state, participants could access unconscious knowledge that they didn't know that they had, leading us to one simple conclusion: you know more than you think. And this brings us back to our flower. Advertisers have known for a long time that even if you aren't paying attention to something, our brains still take in that extra information. Our experiment was an amazing first look at a new way to access this inner intelligence. But to borrow a metaphor from Freud, this really is only the tip of the iceberg. We were only asking general knowledge questions. Imagine if we could find a way to unlock our subconscious knowledge and benefit from it in our everyday lives. Imagine if we could find a way to harness the power of our own unconscious. We want to continue our research, but we need your help to do it. For more information on how you can join our research team or other ways you can help our project, then check out our website at innerintelproject.org. And together we can unlock the secrets of our subconscious.